motherhood is just the longest experiment in patience, because you don't get to know what you've accomplished for, say, 18 years or longer. You put in all this work, but it's going to be 18 years before you really get to sit back and appreciate that work. And yes, there's small moments and wins in between and so many beautiful things, but you're not done with that job for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And so the amount of patience and endurance that it requires is real, but that it's worth it. And I think I was just crying, like tears coming down, because I was feeling like, that's right, no one thanks me, and I'm tired, and all the things I felt. But I was like, okay, it's just, I'm learning delayed gratification, and you are. It's the biggest experiment in delayed gratification. And he was equating it to being such a monumental thing that I don't know that mothers at the time like really understand the work that you're about and how grand and fantastic it is. Because he was saying, like, somebody who's working on that 4-year PhD and putting all that grit and work into it is going to get their result. I mean, it feels hard and heavy. And here he is, a professor at Harvard, and it feels like a really big deal. But you're going to get, it's going to get published, and you're going to end in 4 years. That's nothing compared to mothering. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's nothing compared to what you mothers are doing.
Yeah. Well, and like at the end of the day, there's nothing measurable that you can check off or say, see, look how much further we are on this goal. Or there's nothing tangible at the end of the day to say, yes, I did a good job today. And so you have to, and as women, and I think all people, we have such a tendency to only remember the things we did wrong and to beat ourselves up. And so at the end of the day, instead of going over, okay, I was so patient these 10 times. Oh, but then I lost it this once. And so we only pay attention to the one time that we lost it. Or, me and my daughter had this amazing conversation, and we like really bonded, and she was so cute, but we don't remember that. We only remember the stuff at the end of the day that's bad. And so that's another thing, is like retraining my brain to, I heard somebody once talk about, keeping a journal of payday moments as a mother.
I love that.
Because you don't get paid, but there are these moments, if you are watching for them, that are your payday, and that are the reward for everything that you're putting into it. And so I love that concept. And so I've been starting to pay attention, and I have a little note on my phone of like, this was a payday moment.
Yes. Well, I think it's so important, because we can be our harshest critic, but we can choose to not be. If we'll put some awareness into it, again, having some grace for ourselves, learning how to recognize the wins, celebrate the wins. And I say to you, to other young moms, do celebrate the wins. Like, celebrate every day accomplished is a big win, where you're surviving and the kids are surviving. Those are huge. And I think that it's really helpful. Of course, I'm going to say this, and you're all going to, smile, because of course I'm going to say your friends are helpful. Your fellow pretty sisters. You're like, I think when I look back at mothering, I always, no matter where I was in the stage of it or where I was living, one of the first things I always did and survived because of was find friendship. Mm-hmm. Your mother was a friend of mine when I lived in Maine. I would always try to circle myself with other women in a similar situation, whether it was, friends I was chatting with at dance practice, because I'm with the dance moms right now while we're waiting for our kids, or friends I made at football practice, or the church friends, wherever. I found that the sisterhood that I would surround myself with always helped me to get through the tough times, and also to celebrate the wins, because I could celebrate with them, or I could share with them and commiserate with them and talk with them. And they also could celebrate me, because since we do have a tendency to be our hardest critics, that other women I have found will help me remember the things I'm doing right, and be the first to be like, no, you're doing, just friends have such a great way of calling out those beautiful things about each other that maybe we don't see, to buoy you up.
Yeah.
I remember, Nikki Knighton, also the friend of your mother's, we would run together and train. She helped me train for triathlons, and she was always just like, we felt like our running was therapy. I was like, this is better therapy than anything I could pay for, because we would just talk it out. Totally. So helpful.
Yeah. And every time I get together with friends that are in the same stage of raising young kids, it's always like one of their kids will like yell or scream and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, no, are you kidding me? That is so normal. My kid does that all the time. And like, that happens every time that we get together. It's like
normalizes your experiences.
Yes. And it's like, no, you're not a bad mom because your child is having a tantrum. Just kids have tantrums and you help them work through them and eventually they learn, but it's not right now. Like,
and you need that. You need other moms to validate you and to even give you tips and ideas. And the more you seek out those friendships, girls, if you're not doing it, don't do this alone. Like, really don't. Find your people. Your people will help you.
Yeah. And I think also too, we've moved around a lot because my husband right now is in school. And so he's doing rotations for anesthesia. And so we've had to move every 6 months. And so we have not stayed in the same place for a long time. And so we've had to start over every time we move and like find new friends. And there have been a lot of starting over. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a temptation to be like, I just don't want to do it this time. I don't want to do it again. Like, it takes so much work up front. But every single time it's like the best part of everywhere that we've been. And the last place that we were, we in like our church community and in just, we didn't have a lot of interaction because my husband was at work all day and I was at home with the girls. And so the only place that we would meet people was at church, but there weren't a lot of people in our same stage of life in our ward. And there was a lady that lived across the street. She was 84 years old. And we ran into each other one day and she was like, oh, I don't recognize you. Are you new? And she was like, I'm going to bring you some brownies. And so she did that day, like 2 hours later. So she went home, made the brownies and brought them over. Sweet. She was so sweet. But so she was like, would you like to go on a walk? And she kind of adopted me. And it was like it was the biggest blessing. This 84-year-old woman who just became my best friend during that time that we were there. And to have her wisdom and to be able to like get her, she loved my girls, and to have somebody else when my husband was at work all day long and he would come home at like 7:30 and he would shovel in some food and then we would put the girls to bed and then we would go to bed ourselves because he had to be up at 5:30 the next morning. So we did not get any time together. So it was a very lonely time. And her friendship for me was such a gift. And so I think there's so much value in those friendships at your same level and the people that are in your same stage of life. But her friendship to me has meant more than anything because she took me in and kind of adopted me and just lifted me up when I really needed a friend.
I just love that. And I love how that speaks to the barrier that can be perceived as an age gap doesn't have to be. You know, that somebody with such a different, stage of life could be such a friend to you. It's so important to remember. I just recently we did an activity with our friends at church where we spun around on this, having like this trapeze dare to dream experience. It was so amazing. And I was the planner at the activity. And we had have some older women in our church community that I thought, oh, let's plan something on the ground because I'm trying to accommodate old, young, all stages. Not everybody wants to fly around in a trapeze device like I do.
Sign me up.
What was so funny that surprised me, and it's like, oh, never underestimate the age, is this cute little Lena gal in our ward, and I don't even know her age exactly, but she's above 70, I think, comes walking in, and one of the first people there saying, okay, when are you going to get me up in the air? And she just, no, like other people were nervous to do it, but we put her up in the air. And then another one of the older sisters was like, well, if Lena's doing it, I better do it. So our first few gals to fly were the oldest girls in the room.
Oh, that's amazing.
These older women, gray hair, the whole thing, and they're up there flying, just loving it. So everyone else was like, okay, well, I guess I better do this. They were so fearless. It was hilarious and awesome to see. So yeah, it doesn't matter your age. I mean, I feel like, I'm 51 and just now revisiting this dream of Pretty Sisters that I had started 20 years ago. It was actually one of the greatest things I've said before that I gave up when I was mothering. That I started it and I just didn't have the time for it. And so it was one of those things I sacrificed and put on the altar and just set it aside. And now 20 years later, I'm finally coming back to it. And I could have the tendency to say, oh, I wish I would have and stuck with it, but I couldn't. I just some things just have to give. And this was something that had to give. But here I am 51, which is old, but not old, you know, like it's old. You could say it's older to be starting something like this, but I'm choosing to believe like, no, I'm young and I have the energy. And I think that's the key is the age doesn't matter so much. It's like, what do you have the energy to do? And then do that. And you can find success and joy and fulfillment at any age. And you can be swinging around the room in your 70s or 80s, showing these young girls off. So I love that you created that friendship. That's a beautiful thing.